want the president to make peace with Iran rather than following Bibi Netanyahu into some bombing mission against Iran. If those things happen, that would be the recognition that we have some limits, that we're in a multipolar world, and that we can't bomb our way out of it.
So recently, Jeffrey Sachs went on Al Jazeera English to talk a little bit about his hopes and aspirations for peace, despite everything that's already happened between Israel and Iran and the U.S. supporting Israel. And he talks a little bit about how interventionist foreign policy of the kind that the U.S. has grown accustomed to during my lifetime especially is even less conducive now than it was in a unipolar world. So let's watch, let's react. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Let's move to something less controversial. Let's talk Israel-Palestine.
Yeah, that one's an easy one.
The genocide in Gaza has been going on for a little over a year and a half now. And recently, we've seen a shift. Countries like France, the UK, Canada, even Germany's Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, has been more critical of Israel. Given the scale of devastation, are we at a point where the response we're starting to see is a case of kind of too little, too late?
Well, it's shockingly late, this is for sure, because, just on the official count, there are more than 50,000 dead, and mostly women and children.
Yeah.
So a genocide's been going on all this time, and Europe and the United States were either supporting it actively, as the United States has been doing, or supporting it tacitly by just standing by. Now they're saying something, they're murmuring, but God, it's still far too little, because what should be said, to my mind, is not only that this has to stop, and there was a vote in the UN Security Council just in recent days. 14 of the 15 countries said immediate ceasefire, because people are getting killed massively every day, civilians. But one vetoed it, the Trump administration. So first thing is, of course, stop this mass killing. But the second thing is recognize the state of Palestine. No doubt, no negotiations, no peace process, no baloney, no, we need to get Israel to agree, because Israel will never agree. The problem, of course, is that Israel has a completely radical, I think genocidal government with Netanyahu and Ben-Gvir and Smotrich.
Yeah, Sachs is right. 21 months of genocide so far in Gaza. And now that European leaders may be starting to speak up about it more, Maris has, as Hill pointed out there, it for sure is too little too late. And for the most part, the European powers essentially let the United States essentially kind of do its thing when it comes to Israel. They might make remarks here and there, but a lot of it amounts to the same things they do with Ukraine. They'll pledge money or say certain things to, reaffirm their position. And maybe they're being, more outlandish now about what's transpiring there, but it doesn't really seem to affect policy, not only in the US, but in Europe. Is Europe sending aid to the Palestinians? No. Does Europe want to negotiate peace? No. They mostly want to stay out of it while kind of letting the U.S. run NATO, and the alliance with Israel is certainly different than that. But part of this problem is Netanyahu's. Of course it is, because both the Times of Israel and Haaretz, I think just the Times of Israel actually, they printed an article that said that Mossad knew about this attack coming a year in advance. This is also repeated in the New York Times. Both of those rags, I think, but even those publications printed that. He also exchanged money with a Qatari delegate 2 weeks prior to October 7th, continuing to fund Hamas. So Hamas is as much a proxy of Israel as it is Iran, which they're now using as propaganda to support their military strikes. So yeah, Sachs is mostly right, but a lot of this is too little too late.
And they're mass murderers as far as I'm concerned. And their goal is not defeat Hamas. Their goal is to control everything. This is clear. They don't say, and I think it's the telltale point about Netanyahu, although if you press him, then he would acknowledge it. They don't say, we need to defeat Hamas and then we're going to have a state of Palestine. They say, we need to defeat Hamas. Well, what after that? Well, it's none of your goddamn business.
Right.
And if you press hard, well, we're going to be there forever.
Well, recently,
Yeah, I'll stop there and just comment. I agree with Sachs. They're essentially mass murderers, and I can quantify this with a metric that most people, I think, would at least consider legitimate, and that's lives lost. Now, during October 7th, there were about, by most estimates, I think liberal estimates even, about 35,000 Hamas members, right? And that was public enemy number one, rightly so. There are barbaric terrorist attacks on Israel. Of course, Israel funded Hamas, so it's partially Israel's, responsibility too. But now, with conservative estimates, 50,000 people have died in Gaza since October 7th, in that 21 months. On the higher end of the estimates, I've seen up to about 100,000 or 110,000. And guess who lives mostly in Gaza? It's not Hamas. It's innocent Palestinians. And guess how many of them have been pulled up from the rubble? Now, even if you killed all of the Hamas soldiers, which you haven't, it seems like there's at least, 13,000 left by liberal estimates. They're definitely decimated in ranks. They haven't even fired a rocket from Gaza since April, by the way. Even if you consider that Israel killed all of Hamas, which they didn't, including the casualties on the other side, you have to say that they've killed about 40,000 innocent people that were just there. They just wanted to live their lives. And that's taking a middle point between that 50,000 and 100,000 estimate. So yeah, this is a mass murder campaign. Bibi Netanyahu is a villain. He's a tyrant. He's committing genocide, and he's doing it on the U.S. bankroll. And most U.S. politicians don't seem to care because the Israel lobby has so much influence over them. And we know the influence is greater than we did in the past because Thomas Massie revealed to Tucker Carlson last year that, hell, every congressman has an AIPAC guy. Like, that's a specific guy assigned to them to hold them to voting in the way in which Israel's government would have them vote. It's just absurd. We're a captured people in this way.
we've seen some tensions emerge between Donald Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu.
Boy, I hope so. I hope so. I hope we're seeing some tensions.
Trump did not meet with him in his most recent trip to the Middle East, which seems like a big deal. Some people even said it was a snub.
I hope so. God, if there's anyone that deserves a snub, it's Bibi Netanyahu.
Amen.
If that's true, does that change anything on the ground in terms of U.S. policy?
Look, the president needs to do one thing. Basically one thing and one thing only, and that's to drop the U.S. veto on a state of Palestine. Why is there not a state of Palestine according to international law? For one and only one reason: the U.S. vetoes it, because membership in the United Nations goes through the UN Security Council. When it came up last year, the U.S. was the only veto. It was actually 12 in favor, 2 abstained, the United States vetoed. When it goes to the General Assembly, where there are 193 countries, about 185 say yes.
Yeah.
And when I added up the population of those 185, it is 95% of the world population saying yes. So
Yeah, so on this, first of all, it's very clear at this point. I think we all know from the last days, and I think this was recorded maybe 5 days ago. There's no evidence that Trump snubbed Netanyahu. All the indications are the opposite. Even that Trump may have squashed and allowed Netanyahu's strike on Iran to undermine the U.S. negotiations with Iran, which were their foreign policy objectives. That's what we were all told anyways, that Trump wanted to negotiate to curtail their nuclear weapons program to the extent that it exists, which Tulsi Gabbard said it doesn't. And now recently she's tweeted that now they can get a bomb within weeks. So 6 weeks ago, she said in her annual threat report, which details various threats throughout the world, she said there's no evidence that they have a nuclear weapon, that they're working toward one, or even that they restarted their program since 2003. And then just last night, she tweeted, they're a few weeks away. So many people now think she's compromised. I do as well. It's hard to see otherwise. But yeah, Sachs cares too much, in my estimation, about international consensus on this. And I'm not saying that there's no logic behind that. There's no reason to bring it up. But to me, it's just the America First solution that we can cut ties with Israel and allow a second state to flourish. Now, political solutions are never easy, especially in the turmoil of the Middle East. But I say get out of it, allow the peace process to continue, allow a U.S. politician to serve as a negotiator or something like that. But I don't want the U.S. bankrolling either side of it. And it was so many presidents' policies, by the way, that there would be a second state. There would be a Palestinian state. I think Clinton, Bush Sr., I'm not sure about Reagan, and I think Obama had that position. So it's not like that's so radical, but the way you would think of it after, October 7th, it's just unfathomable, again, because of the Israel lobby. The Israel lobby will not allow that to happen. Likud and Netanyahu won't let it happen either. They've lived their lives to prevent that, and Netanyahu funded Hamas to prevent that. He did that because it would, create a rift between the PLO and Hamas and create this organization of terrorists that no one would feel comfortable negotiating with. They lack legitimacy that an actual authority would to negotiate that. Trump also moved the embassy to Jerusalem, which the Palestinians want to have part of Jerusalem as part of a future Palestinian state, and that did a lot to squash that as well.
President Trump snubbing Netanyahu is one thing, not liking him is another thing, but there's only one operational thing that counts. Stop vetoing Palestine's membership in the United Nations. And the point that I would make to President Trump and to the American people is this would be hugely beneficial for American national security because it would bring peace to the Middle East. The reason the wars rage is that there is no state of Palestine. That leads to resistance. That leads to counter wars. That leads to Netanyahu's counter wars or calling on the United States to invade another country as he has done repeatedly. If we want peace, which we do, the way to peace is a state of Palestine alongside the state of Israel, period, which 185 countries of the world support.
Yeah, I'd support it too. Again, I just don't want the U.S. involved in bankrolling either side. And that is what often comes from these entangling alliances. It's not really that feasible to get into that situation so long as AIPAC gives so much money to our congressmen that, our bureaucrats are ruled by the Israel lobby as well and make judgments in their favor in almost every regard. You got the president out there boasting about how pro-Israel he actually is. It doesn't seem feasible to me. And again, political solutions are never, they're never beneficial relative to private solutions in my mind, but they are more beneficial in some cases compared to war solutions. And all we've seen in my lifetime is war solutions. It's wars in the Middle East because of Israel pulling us in, people complicit on the U.S. side, don't get me wrong. The neocons and the Zionists have always wanted to fight on their favor in everything, from Syria to Libya to Iraq, and now Iran. And it's been disastrous. It's always been disastrous, but that's the world in which we live now. And it will continue to happen until we disconnect aid to Israel.
You've written about the U.S. belief in its need to dominate and the idea that historically the United States has seen itself as exceptional. In your book on American exceptionalism, which was published during the first Trump administration, you warned that this mindset was not only outdated, but also dangerous. Are there any signs that the U.S.'s self-perception is shifting from the exceptionalist idea?
Yeah, it's a very good question. There are glimmers of hope. Our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, said, and I nearly quote him, that we are now in a multipolar world.
He did. I was actually really surprised when he said that. That was early when Trump took office, but he did start talking about foreign policy in a way in regard to the polarity of the world. Now it's a multipolar world, meaning there's many world powers more closely and relatively at the strength of the U.S. The U.S. is still a superpower. It still has more military might, more, weaponry than any other power in the world, more ability to project its might around the globe, by the way. I hate that fact, by the way, to be honest. But it is true. But there's also China and Russia and, England, and there's the rising India right now. So you have this multipolar world, and it makes interventionism even worse than it was in a unipolar world, because world powers aren't going to fund their own proxies to try to stop you as much. Now, that did happen during the Cold War, of course. That was when there was a vying superpower. But in that era afterward, the U.S. just started bombing helpless countries. So, the Iraq War is the best example. They invaded Iraq because one Arab country invaded another over a slant drilling dispute, and somehow that's our problem now. But that's how the U.S. started off in, months after the fall of the Berlin Wall, months after the Soviet Union crumbled.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. That is a very good statement. President Trump has said he can see President Putin's point of view that NATO should not enlarge to Ukraine. That is a very good statement. That is absolutely positive. I want him to recognize the same thing when it comes to the Middle East. I want the president to recognize the same thing when it comes to China. I want the president to make peace with Iran rather than following Bibi Netanyahu into some bombing mission against Iran. If those things happen, that would be the recognition that we have some limits, that we're in a multipolar world, and that we can't bomb our way out of it.
100% agree with every word he said there in that last statement. Look, I know a lot of the right-wing dissidents watching this might not like this, but I fear that antagonism toward China will manifest in a way similarly to how it has in Ukraine, where we're dumping money into Ukraine, $200 billion at this point to fight a proxy war. And, a lot of the right-wingers fear China. They believe that China is somehow a bigger threat than their own government, despite the fact their own government takes about half their wealth. They start wars overseas. They've started a surveillance state. We got TSA, the DHS, FBI targeting, Patriot Act, the Twitter files revealing how much social media companies collaborated with deep state entities to censor speech. All this stuff, despite all this stuff, a lot of right-wingers still consider China the biggest enemy in the world. If you dump money into the Taiwan situation, antagonize China, it won't turn out to our benefit. So I'm with him on every single word, including the Middle East. That's the hottest to talk about right now because of what Israel is doing to Iran, which I want no part of. I don't want the U.S. involved in that whatsoever. I'm still praying for peace. It looks like we're on the verge of war at the time I'm recording this. The U.S. hasn't supposedly done any direct strikes yet, but we'll have to see how that unfolds. But I think Sachs is right. He looks to international consensus more than I would in terms of the reasons for which this is a good idea. I'm more of an America-only kind of guy, an America first guy in the truest sense, not the Trumpian sense, which is often Israel first, but America first. That's what I believe in. So I do want to hear from what you guys think, though. Do you think that foreign antagonism is greater than it has ever been before in terms of U.S. exerting its will across seas? Has there been any other time throughout U.S. history where you've seen it more? Do you agree with Jeffrey Sachs? Let me know in the comments below. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and please consider becoming a YouTube member or a Patreon patron. That would go a long way to supporting my channel, and I'd really appreciate it. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. I'll catch you in the next one.